You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take, Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham, and today we have an excellent podcast on tap for you. We are talking college football, major shakeup in the college football landscape with the college football playoffs yesterday, and so I want to hop right to it. I've got with us today our college football analyst, a good friend of mine, and an absolute stud in the college football knowledge industry, if you will. His name is Alan Malae. Alan, talk to us. What did you see yesterday? What stood out to you that was just shocking beyond anything? And what can we expect going down the home stretch of the college football season?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Sean. Always a pleasure to get on the STB podcast.
Yes, the pleasure is ours.
Yesterday was probably one of the crazier days we've seen in college football in probably a couple of years, right? I mean,
seriously.
I don't know what's more surprising, Ohio State losing the way they did, or Bedlam, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State having the type of game that they had. It was, top to bottom, it was one of the funnest days of college football I've seen in a long time.
Now, question for you. In that Oklahoma State game, did the defenses, did they make it to the game, or was that...
Well, we all know how good Big 12 defenses are, right? They've been famous for it for years.
Yeah. What was the final score of that game? Like 108 to 106 or something like that?
Close. I think that's a little low, on the low side.
Baker Mayfield had 600 yards passing, 6 touchdowns. Crazy.
He actually won the Heisman yesterday. They gave it to him. It's like, hey, man, 20 touchdowns in a row. Here you go. Seriously.
No, it was crazy because, the Big Ten, I was on, just a few days ago, I did a podcast about college football and who I thought was the favorite. And I said that I thought Ohio State was going to win out and therefore hop in to the college football playoffs. And obviously I was dead wrong. And I thought if they lost, that Penn State would also win out and they'd be in the driver's seat.
They lost too.
And they lost as well. And I just don't see Wisconsin getting into the college football playoff.
You're not wrong. So here's the thing. Wisconsin has the meat of their schedule coming up these last few weeks. And then they'll obviously have the Big Ten championship game. But with Ohio State getting absolutely blown out yesterday and their second loss of the season, combined with Penn State losing yesterday with their second loss of the season, you're looking at a scenario where if the Big Ten gets in, it's either going to be Wisconsin or Michigan State. Now, rewind this just 2 weeks ago. Who would have ever thought that Wisconsin and Michigan State would be the two teams vying to represent the Big Ten in the college football playoff? It's anarchy out there.
It's crazy. So here's my thing. In my opinion, so Wisconsin's 9-0. Obviously, they're the only undefeated team left in the Big Ten. In fact, every other team in the Big Ten has 2 losses, right? So but Wisconsin's had the easiest schedule. Say they win out, including the Big Ten championship game. They'd be
Wisconsin?
13. Yeah, they'd be 13-0 at that point. Do they get in over like in Oklahoma?
100%. So if you remember the first year that the playoffs came out, you remember that TCU got left out of the playoffs.
Got snubbed, yeah, because no conference championship game. Yep.
They had no conference championship game. They got left out of the playoffs, and they got in with an Ohio State team that had 1 loss, but they had the conference championship to bolster them up. And what you've seen with the rankings throughout the years is that more than anything, the College Football Playoff Committee, they value wins and losses. Second would be strength and schedule. And if you're undefeated, no matter what, especially if you're in a Power 5 conference, if you go undefeated in a Power 5 conference, if your strength of schedule is dead last, they're still going to let you in, just because of the gauntlet that you have to go through to go undefeated like that. So we're looking at a scenario where Wisconsin's probably going to be the representative. Who's going to beat them? Who's left? And they're playing decent football, and they've got some hogs up front on the offensive and defensive line.
I guess who would beat them would be Ohio State, right? Ohio State can still win the Big Ten if Ohio State wins out, because they already beat Penn State, so they own the tiebreaker there. If they beat Michigan, right, wouldn't they go to the Or who does Michigan? Because Michigan State, Ohio State didn't lose to Michigan State, so I think Ohio State can still win the Big Ten and then give Wisconsin their single loss.
I just don't think they will. Losing to Oklahoma, there's no shame in that, but losing the way they did to Iowa, this is the second year in a row we've seen Ohio State drop a really bad game that's totally inexplicable.
Yeah.
And if you look at them, when you're playing for national championships and then suddenly you're not, it does a ringer on the team's mind. So Urban Meyer, he's really got to stay focused on keeping his team's mentality up and his team's morale up, especially after a blowout loss like that to Iowa. Yeah. Iowa, of all teams, they're tough.
Yeah.
The Farm Boys are tough, but they're not. They shouldn't be beating Ohio State like that ever.
Yeah. No, that was a shocking game, and then the Penn State one was also surprising to me. The Big Ten just kind of, honestly, it felt like they played their way out of the college football playoffs to me yesterday because I just don't see Wisconsin. I'm going to actually disagree with you and think that if Oklahoma wins out, I feel like the committee takes Oklahoma this year. I don't know. I could be wrong.
You might be right. If they can stay at one loss, absolutely.
Yeah, they'd have to stay at one loss, absolutely. Yeah.
I felt like I was watching the Big Ten play yesterday. I felt like I was watching the Pac-12 just beat each other up and play themselves out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see. USC had a good win against Arizona. I'll tell you what, that Khalil Tate guy, he is the only person I've ever seen run the ball like him is Lamar Jackson, and he's not as good at throwing the ball, but he's going to be something special. He's going to be a Heisman candidate next year. Mark my word.
No, I believe it. Let me give you a couple more scenarios here, and I know we only got just a couple more minutes, but say Wisconsin wins out, and Georgia loses a close game in the SEC championship to Alabama for their only loss of the season.
Right.
Does the SEC get two teams in, and Wisconsin gets left out? Because clearly Georgia's had a far tougher schedule, and if their only loss is to the number one team in the country by. Anyway, that's just a scenario. What would you, if you had a vote, what would your vote be?
So it's funny you say that. I was looking at Georgia's schedule. I mean, they play in the part of the SEC that's not that good. Here's the thing. Again, if Wisconsin goes undefeated, if there's a Power 5 team that goes undefeated, they're gonna get in, no matter what. It would go against everything the College Football Playoff Committee has shown us over the last few years. If it was tied 1-1, Georgia would get in for sure. They each had one loss. But even if Georgia loses to Alabama, Wisconsin's getting in if they're undefeated. You can take that to the bank. I'd sign my deed over on there. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, it is tough to leave a conference champion, undefeated Power 5 conference champ out of the college football playoff. That is very, very true. Okay. Yeah. Okay. What do you see happening with Miami and Clemson? Miami and Notre Dame, first of all, play this week. Just this coming so in 6 days on Saturday. Notre Dame and
Catholics
Miami.
versus convicts.
Catholics versus convicts. That's right. Hey, so for those of you listening, Alan, by the way, has one of the best college football and just college sports in general Instagram pages out there. It's just College Rivals. Hilarious
College
stuff.
Rivals, that's correct.
So just College Rivals on Instagram. I want to see some Catholics versus convicts memes this week, Alan.
Oh, we'll get it. We'll get it. The great thing about how the page works is that I don't come up with – well, I come up with about 15% of the content. The rest is all sent in by the fans, and they use my page as a platform to talk trash against each other during game week or all season long.
And it's hilarious, by the way. Every single thing is posted is hilarious.
The things they come up with is it's just great, and you can really see the passion that fans have for their college teams nationwide. So it's been a lot of fun running it. But yeah,
bro, there was one yesterday.
College Rivals.
There was College Rivals. Everybody check it out. There was one yesterday that I saw posted that I think you need to repost if you think it's worthy. But it was a Boise State fan holding up a sign as they played Nevada saying, "We hated Kaepernick before it was cool."
Send me that, and I will post it. That's fantastic. I didn't see that.
It was so funny. And then in parentheses it said for football reasons, not because we're racist. It was really funny.
You got to stay PC. That is great. Oh man. Okay,
so funny.
I'll post it as soon as I hang up with you, bud.
Good stuff.
Miami, Notre Dame. Here's the thing. Miami has got to be the best not good team that I watched play this year. I don't know. Somehow they're still undefeated. They don't have any crazy playmakers. They just don't lose. So we'll see what happens. I think I'm kind of high on Notre Dame after them beating USC the way they did a couple weeks ago, last week.
Yeah, Notre Dame seems legit, and they're obviously not in a conference, but given their name, with only one loss and the schedule they have, if they win out, I don't think there's any way they get left out of the playoffs.
Well, see, there's where that gets fun. If Notre Dame gets into the playoffs, you're looking at 2 Power 5 conference champions not getting in,
Yep.
which I think would cause chaos. So I'm
well, it'll be the Big Ten and the Pac-12, in my opinion. But you're thinking maybe the Big 12 and the Pac-12.
Yeah, I don't think the Big 12 will get in. TCU's great. They have a great offense. They don't play much defense. Nobody does in that conference. But I think TCU. Here's the thing: if you're in the Big 12 with the strength of schedule and the strength of their conference overall, top to bottom, outside of Oklahoma, everyone's kind of ho-hum. So if you don't go undefeated in the Big 12, you're not getting into the playoffs. If you have one loss, you're done. You're just not going to get in.
Yeah.
So I don't think TCU's going to win out. They've had some close games against some subpar opponents. They've had some great games against tough opponents. So we'll see. They had a nice win against Texas last week. But I just don't see a Big 12 team getting in. Maybe a one-loss Oklahoma team, but we'll see. It depends on what Georgia does. It depends on what USC does. It depends if Wisconsin wins out. So there's a lot of scenarios that could happen right now across the board. Clemson, I mean, they've only got one loss. So when Clemson and Miami meet up, that's going to be a huge game. In fact, that game will probably determine the fates of a lot of other teams the rest of the way.
Oh, absolutely. So and we'll end with this. So my prediction a few days ago, before Ohio State and Penn State both lost, of course, was my college football playoff Final Four, if you will, is Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. Obviously, Ohio State is out now. They've got 2 losses.
Right.
I'm going to go ahead and predict that Oklahoma is the one that leapfrogs. Who would be? So my Final Four would be Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Oklahoma. But let's hear yours, and then we'll end with that.
It's funny. Oklahoma could do it, but every year I've got a pretty strong, solid 4 going in. I think I've only been wrong 1 out of the 3 years that we've had the playoff. This year I have no idea who's getting in. Outside of Alabama, everyone looks like they have flaws. I don't know what Nick Saban's feeding those guys down there.
Money.
But right.
Cash.
Well, Saban's not doing it. He's got some very secret.
Yeah, he's got
taking care of all that.
He's got Rick Pitino's assistants doing it for him.
Yeah, well, I mean they've had the #1 recruiting class for over a decade. Like, we're crazy if we think that's not going on. Anyway, money. So if I'm going my top 4, I'm going Alabama. I think they'll beat Georgia, so I don't think Georgia will get in. I'm probably going to go USC, Notre Dame. So Alabama, USC, Notre Dame, and then it's going to be Oklahoma or it's going to be Wisconsin. We'll see what happens between those 2.
You think USC with 2 losses out of the Pac-12 is going to get in, huh?
Excuse me, no. USC is not getting in. I apologize. I keep forgetting to have that second loss.
Washington has 1 loss out of the Pac-12.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say. I think because Washington got in last year with 1 loss, and if they can win out, they're going to do it again. So
who's Washington got left? Let me look at that real quick.
Because they're going to play USC in the Pac-12 championship. I don't think anyone's going to. I think we can pretty safely say that USC is going to get there. They'll probably win out and get there with 2 losses. USC plays their best ball at the end of the year, and they beat Washington last year.
Yeah.
So Washington's got something to prove when they see them again in the Pac-12 title game. And it's going to be that title game against USC that pushes Washington over the top and gets them in.
Yeah, so Washington plays at Stanford this week, then against your Utes the following week here in Salt Lake.
Yes.
And then it's not in Salt Lake. It's a home game in Washington. And then they play at home against Washington State, who's ranked.
Hey, I've always wanted to go a game in Washington. We should go see it. Just put that on the back burner. Anyway, continue.
No, so that's the remaining schedule. Then they would play USC most likely in the Pac-12. Yeah, so if they win out, that's a tough schedule to keep out of the playoffs as well. They may end up getting the leapfrog over Oklahoma, but
yeah, I think they will, because their strength of schedule will be higher than Oklahoma's playing in the Big 12. There's just more better. There's more teams that are better in the Pac-12 than there is in the Big 12, and so I think that you're going to see it. And then depending on who wins against
Oklahoma
Miami,
does have that win against Ohio State though.
But Ohio State isn't looking as good as they were a week ago, unfortunately. That loss. So the worst thing that happened to Oklahoma was Ohio State getting blown out by Iowa.
Yeah. But if they win the Big Ten still, which is still very much a possibility for the Buckeyes, if they win the Big Ten, I mean, they're still the Big Ten champs, and Oklahoma can be like, we beat them at their place.
Right.
By 2 touchdowns.
By 2 touchdowns. What it's going to come down to is Miami and Clemson head-to-head matchup. How Notre Dame finishes. Is Wisconsin going to win it? Because I think Michigan State's going to get some losses, and will Washington win out? Depending on how that shakes up, will be whether or not Oklahoma gets in. I would probably put Oklahoma at 5th right now, for me.
Yeah, that's what they're at in the AP poll. But, well, my bold prediction, I was dead wrong about Ohio State. I admit it. I'm going to stick with the 3 I had before: Bama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and I'll just say Oklahoma ends up stealing that 4th spot, because they still got to play TCU. That's a great school to beat. So I'll say them.
I think TCU is going to beat them, but we'll see.
Okay, well, that's Alan. We got to let you go here, but we want to chat with you again. By the way, everybody, Alan has a fantastic idea to shake up the entire landscape of the power conferences and the, I guess what do you call the others?
Change it.
The Power 5 and the what 5? What do you call them?
The Power 5 and the Group of 5, I think it's time to blow it all up, start from scratch, come up with new conferences, new boundaries, get all the teams that are deserving into the power conferences, all the teams that aren't, cut them, and just redo everything and how we do it, the bowl system, the playoff system, everything. So
love it. It's very interesting stuff.
Change it, baby.
Very interesting stuff, which we will catch up on in a later podcast this year. But Alan, thanks a ton for joining us. You're the man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sean.
All right, everybody, that is today's podcast. I am out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out stbsportstake.com. Simply the best in sports.